It happened just 7 minutes ago. 7 minutes that shook the walls of Buckingham Palace, sent ripples through Hollywood, and left Meghan Markle in utter disbelief. Imagine reading a message that changes the course of your life in an instant. Now imagine it coming from your father-in-law, the King of England. That's exactly what happened today. King Charles made a declaration, one that crushed the dreams of Meghan and Harry and reshaped the future of their children forever. Archie and Lilibet, two of the youngest members of the royal family, have officially been denied the titles of prince and princess. No exceptions. No loopholes. Out for good. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Can you even begin to fathom the weight of that decision? In the blink of an eye, years of hope, planning, and careful maneuvering were stripped away. The debate that has simmered for decades about the privileges and status of Harry and Meghan's children has finally been settled, and not in their favor. The palace corridors that once echoed with whispers of royal succession and future coronations now carry a silence so heavy, it's almost deafening. Why would King Charles make such a definitive move? Was it a purely traditional decision, sticking to centuries of royal protocol? Or was there something deeper, an undercurrent of tension, resentment, or strategic calculation? To the outside world, it may look like a matter of titles. But inside the palace, this is about power, influence, legacy, and, most importantly, control. Meghan Markle, a woman who has fought tirelessly to carve out a space for herself and her family within the royal framework, is reportedly reeling. Her hopes for the recognition of her children as true royals have been dashed in a matter of minutes. And Harry, caught between the love for his family and loyalty to the institution he was born into, now faces a challenge that tests the limits of his patience, his resilience, and his devotion. The timing couldn't be more dramatic. For months, speculation has swirled. Rumors of secret meetings, hushed conversations, and palace insiders leaking information to favored media outlets have kept the public on edge. Headlines have teased the world with possibilities. Will Archie become a prince? Is Lilibet next in line for royal recognition? But today, the question has been answered, bluntly, decisively, and without compromise. It's easy to forget that these titles are more than mere labels. In the monarchy, a title is a symbol of legitimacy, recognition, and a connection to centuries of tradition. To deny a child a royal title is to deny them not only status, but a piece of their heritage. It is, in many ways, a declaration that they do not belong, at least not in the way that others in the royal family do. Consider the impact this has on Meghan personally. For someone who has been under the intense scrutiny of the press, for someone who has faced relentless criticism and public judgment, the hope that her children would be recognized as princes and princesses was more than symbolic. It was validation. It was a shield against the relentless attacks, a reassurance that her family's place in the monarchy was secure. Now that shield has been removed. And yet, there is more at play here than just personal disappointment. This decision sends a signal, to Harry, to the rest of the royal family, and to the public at large. It signals that tradition still holds sway, that even the children of the most famous couple in the world are not immune to the rules of the monarchy, that power, influence, and the careful orchestration of public perception still define who is included and who is excluded. The palace has, of course, offered statements. Carefully worded, as is always the case with royal communications. They speak of respect for tradition, the importance of clarity in titles, and the desire to maintain consistency across generations. But beneath the polished prose lies a tension that no official statement can mask. Because this is about more than tradition, it is about control, about who gets to decide the future of the royal family, and who does not. And what about Harry? His position is precarious. For years, he has tried to balance the weight of his heritage with the desire to forge a new path for himself and his family. He stepped back from official royal duties to protect his wife and children, to create a life that allowed them some semblance of freedom and autonomy. Yet, even that choice does not insulate him from the decisions made by the head of the family. Charles's announcement is a stark reminder that no matter how far he steps away, the monarchy still exerts influence over his children's destinies. There are whispers, of course, rumors of private conversations, behind-the-scenes lobbying, and perhaps even miscommunication between family members. Some suggest Meghan and Harry may have expected a different outcome, that private assurances were made, promises that now feel broken. Others hint at a more strategic move, that Charles's timing was deliberate, designed to assert authority in the wake of the couple's growing influence in the public sphere. The stakes are personal, political, and public all at once. For the public, it's a scandal, a headline that fuels debates on social media, in newspapers, and on television. For Meghan and Harry, it's a personal crisis, a confrontation with the realities of royal life and its limitations. And for King Charles, it is a calculated decision, one that reinforces his role as monarch and protector of tradition. Imagine the emotional tension in that room. The palace, where history meets modernity, where family loyalty clashes with duty, where love and protocol are constantly in tension. Meghan's reaction is reportedly one of shock, disbelief, and anger. Her fury is understandable. How could a decision made in such secrecy, with such finality, leave her and her children so exposed? How could centuries of family history and societal expectation converge in a single decree that feels like an outright denial? And yet, in true royal fashion, the official announcement is calm, measured, almost detached. There are no dramatic statements of condemnation. No public outburst from Charles. Only the cold, deliberate language of a monarch exercising his authority. And that, perhaps, is what cuts the deepest. Because it leaves Meghan and Harry without a public avenue for protest, without an immediate means to challenge or negotiate. The decision is final. For the world, it is a headline. For Meghan, Harry, and their children, it is reality. But the story does not end here. There are questions that remain unanswered. How will this affect the children's public roles, their interactions with other royals, and their own sense of identity? How will Meghan respond in the weeks and months to come? Will Harry step in to challenge the decision, or will he seek alternative paths to protect his family? And what does this mean for the monarchy itself, which has long struggled to balance tradition with modernity, public image with private realities? What we know for certain is that this announcement is not just a headline. It is a turning point. It is a moment that will reverberate through the palace, through the media, and through the hearts of those who have followed this story for years. And it raises a question that hangs in the air, heavy and unspoken. Can the monarchy truly reconcile the desires of the present with the weight of centuries of tradition, or are conflicts like this inevitable, and even necessary, to maintain its authority? For now, all anyone can do is watch. Watch the fallout, watch the responses, watch as history continues to unfold in real time. Because one thing is clear, this decision will not go quietly. It will ignite conversations, debates, and perhaps even confrontations that will shape the future of the royal family for years to come. And yet, just when it seems that the story has reached its climax, there is a twist, a revelation that even the most informed royal watchers did not anticipate. A secret conversation, a leaked message, or a subtle indication in a public appearance may hint at what comes next. And it is this twist, this next chapter, that promises to change everything once again. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. The news hit like a thunderclap. One moment, the palace was calm, routine buzzing in the halls, and the next, everything changed. A decree had been issued, clear and final. Archie and Lilibet would not receive royal titles. The announcement itself was concise, almost clinical, but the ramifications were anything but. In every corner of Buckingham Palace, whispers became murmurs, murmurs became speculation, and speculation quickly transformed into shock. Imagine being inside those walls, where tradition and protocol dictate every move, where every word, every glance, every gesture carries centuries of history, and then hearing something that fundamentally disrupts that balance. The courtiers who had spent years managing palace affairs, the aides who arranged schedules and public appearances, even the guards who had long since grown used to the predictable rhythm of royal life. All of them paused. Something unprecedented had just happened. King Charles had made the call, and there was no ambiguity, no room for negotiation, no hint that this could change later. In the letter delivered to the relevant parties, the wording was precise. Archie Harrison Mountbatten-Windsor and Lilibet Diana Mountbatten-Windsor would not be granted the styles or titles of prince or princess. The language, carefully chosen, reflected authority and finality. A monarch had spoken, and the palace, and the world, listened. The reactions were immediate, and they were intense. On one side, there were those who nodded in understanding, citing centuries of precedent. To them, this was a matter of clarity, of maintaining consistency across the monarchy. If titles were granted to some, but not others, the fabric of royal tradition could unravel. They saw in Charles's decision a necessary step, a ruler enforcing order in a family and institution often criticized for being too opaque. But on the other side, there was shock, disbelief, and frustration. Meghan Markle, whose life has been no stranger to scrutiny, reportedly experienced a surge of anger and panic. Imagine reading something so monumental and feeling the ground shift beneath your feet. How could a decision of such magnitude be communicated in such a straightforward, almost detached manner? How could her children, the very symbols of her legacy within the royal family, be excluded so completely? And Harry, caught between his love for Meghan and his loyalty to his father, now faced a dilemma that few can truly understand. This wasn't just a matter of titles. It was about identity, recognition, and the delicate balance of maintaining familial and institutional bonds. Would he confront his father? Challenge the decision publicly? Or would he retreat into the privacy he fought so hard to protect, shielding his family from further conflict? The timing of the announcement only amplified the drama. For months, rumors had circulated, secret meetings in the palace, whispers of compromise, hints that an understanding might be reached behind closed doors. The public had been kept on edge, speculating endlessly. Would Archie be a prince? Could Lilibet inherit some future honorific? But all speculation ended today. The question had been answered, unequivocally. Within the palace, the atmosphere was electric. Staff moved silently, some shaking their heads, others speaking in hushed tones about the unprecedented nature of the announcement. The private corridors, usually a place of careful discretion and measured speech, now carried a sense of tension that was palpable. Every aide, every advisor, every royal household member knew this was a defining moment, one that would ripple outward, affecting not just family dynamics, but public perception of the monarchy itself. It is important to consider why this decision has such profound implications. Titles in the monarchy are not mere labels. They are symbols, carrying weight that extends beyond the individual. To deny a child a royal title is to deny them a piece of their heritage, a recognition that validates their place within the family and, by extension, the nation. It is a statement about belonging, legitimacy, and the invisible yet undeniable hierarchy that has governed the royal family for centuries. For Meghan, the sting of this decision is both personal and symbolic. Her fight for recognition has been ongoing, a careful balancing act between her role as a mother, her public persona, and her position within the royal structure. The hope that her children would receive titles was more than vanity. It was an assertion of her family's rightful place within an institution that has scrutinized her at every turn. To see that hope dashed is not merely disappointing. It is a profound emotional blow, one that challenges the very foundation of her trust in the monarchy. The palace, ever conscious of public image, quickly released statements. They emphasized tradition, clarity, and consistency. They spoke of a desire to maintain the integrity of the institution, to uphold standards that had been carefully maintained for generations. But beneath the formal language lay tension, uncertainty, and human drama. Because while statements can provide context, they cannot soothe the emotional upheaval that comes from a decision so deeply personal, yet so publicly resonant. Harry's predicament adds another layer of complexity. He has spent years navigating the pressures of royalty while trying to build a life independent of the institution. His decision to step back from official duties, to relocate to the United States, and to create a new framework for his family was meant to provide safety and autonomy. Yet, this announcement is a stark reminder that the monarchy's influence cannot be entirely escaped. No matter how far he moves, how many boundaries he sets, the decisions made within the walls of Buckingham Palace reverberate into his personal life, affecting his children and the family he has worked to protect. The timing and method of delivery also raise questions. Was this an intentional assertion of authority by King Charles? A move to remind Harry and Meghan of the limitations imposed by tradition? Or was it merely a calculated decision to maintain consistency in a family where titles and succession are deeply intertwined with national identity and expectation? Whatever the reasoning, the effect is undeniable. The announcement has changed the landscape of royal life, and the impact will be felt for years to come. Across the globe, the public reacted almost immediately. News outlets, social media platforms, and commentary shows erupted with speculation, analysis, and opinion. Fans and critics alike debated the fairness, implications, and potential fallout of the decision. For some, it was a reaffirmation of royal tradition. For others, it was a heartbreaking example of exclusion and hierarchy. The contrast between private turmoil within the palace and public fascination outside it created a tension that only added to the drama. And yet, even as the headlines spread and the world digested the news, the real story continued behind closed doors. There were private conversations, tense phone calls, and subtle negotiations that the public would never see. The palace is a place of layers, layers of protocol, layers of secrecy, layers of human emotion. And it is within those layers that the next twists in this story would emerge. But perhaps the most striking element of all is the emotional resonance. The children, Archie and Lilibet, are at the center of this storm. Innocent, unaware of the forces shaping their lives, yet profoundly affected by the decisions of adults. The denial of their titles is not merely a procedural matter. It is a message, one that will shape their sense of identity and their place within a family that is both intensely scrutinized and deeply traditional. As the palace staff processed the announcement, as Meghan and Harry grappled with the implications, and as the world reacted with fascination and outrage, one question lingered in the air. What comes next? Will the royal family find a way to reconcile personal feelings with institutional necessity? Will Meghan and Harry seek alternative avenues to protect their children's place in history? Or will this moment mark the beginning of a deeper rift, one that changes the dynamics of the monarchy for generations? And then, just when it seemed that the dust had settled, a secret emerged, one that nobody expected. A private conversation, an insider report, a subtle indication that this was only the beginning. That even in the wake of an official decree, forces were at play that could challenge, undermine, or even reverse what had been decided. But the revelation was not public. Not yet. It was a whisper, a rumor, a hint that the palace's story was far from complete. And it is this whisper, the promise of secrets yet to be revealed, that sets the stage for what comes next, a chapter that will expose the depth of tension, emotion, and strategy that defines the royal family's most intimate decisions. The announcement that stunned the palace is complete, but the drama is only beginning. And what comes next will take us even deeper into the world behind the headlines, into the rooms and corridors where decisions are made and futures are shaped, and into the heart of Meghan and Harry's struggle for recognition, respect, and security. When Meghan Markle received the news, it hit her like a tidal wave. Not just surprising, it was infuriating. Imagine sitting in your home, thousands of miles away from Buckingham Palace, scrolling through your phone, when the headline screams at you, Archie and Lilibet will not receive royal titles. The words seemed almost surreal, like a script from a drama too outrageous to be true. And yet, it was real. This was her reality, and there was no escaping it. Her first reaction was shock. The disbelief that such a final decision could be made without her knowledge, without warning, left her momentarily speechless. She had fought hard, navigated countless controversies, and endured a media storm for years. She had worked tirelessly to ensure her children's place within the royal hierarchy, believing that Archie and Lilibet had a rightful claim, a symbolic recognition of their lineage and their mother's tireless advocacy. And now, in a matter of minutes, that hope was stripped away. The fury came quickly, unrelenting. She paced the rooms of her home, her mind racing. Every scenario she had envisioned for her family's future, public appearances, royal duties, recognition, security, was now clouded by this unexpected decree. She had imagined the celebrations, the quiet pride of seeing her children acknowledged by the very institution that had scrutinized her so harshly. Now, those dreams lay in ruins. The palace staff had predicted this moment, but nothing could prepare her for the emotional impact. Meghan reportedly called close confidants, her voice shaking with anger and disbelief. How could Charles, her father-in-law, make such a sweeping, irreversible decision without consulting her? Why was the decision so impersonal, so detached, so final? And most importantly, why had they ignored the assurances she believed were in place? Inside the walls of her home, Meghan's emotions oscillated between fury, heartbreak, and determination. She wasn't just upset, she was incensed. The sense of betrayal was palpable. All those late nights, strategic meetings, and careful planning suddenly felt futile. She had navigated public perception with precision, built a narrative that cast her family in a favorable light, and yet here was the monarchy, undermining everything she had worked for. But Meghan is not someone who sits quietly in the face of adversity. Her anger quickly transformed into action. She began drafting letters, making phone calls, and mobilizing allies. She sought to understand every nuance of the decision, to uncover the reasoning behind it, and to challenge the narrative being presented publicly. The palace might have presented a calm, measured statement, but Meghan was ready to confront the reality head-on. The tension in her household mirrored the broader public intrigue. Friends and confidants describe a mix of controlled strategy and raw emotion. She alternated between methodical planning, how to respond, how to protect her children, and candid emotional expression, allowing herself to feel the full weight of the injustice she perceived. Every text, every call, every private discussion became a battleground for influence, perception, and the future of her family. At the same time, Meghan's anger was not just directed at the decision itself, but at the secrecy surrounding it. Months of speculation, rumors of compromise, and private assurances had built an expectation that the palace might have tacitly allowed. To discover that those assurances, if they even existed, were meaningless struck her as both insulting and dismissive. It was a betrayal, she felt, not just of her family, but of her trust in an institution she had sought to engage with constructively. In the immediate aftermath, her team scrambled to gather information. What had been said in the palace? Who had influenced the decision? Were there documents, communications, or hidden memos that might offer insight or leverage? Meghan's response was meticulous, fueled by emotion but disciplined by strategy. Every move was measured, every communication considered, every reaction purposeful. The anger, however, was unmistakable. Close aides describe moments when Meghan's fury was palpable, her voice sharp, her gestures precise, every sentence carrying the weight of someone confronting injustice on both personal and public fronts. And yet, beneath the anger, there was an undercurrent of fear, not for herself, but for her children. Archie and Lilibet, young, innocent, and unprepared for the political currents swirling around them, were suddenly thrust into a situation that would shape their identities and futures in profound ways. Her emotional response was also complicated by the public dimension of the news. She knew that millions of people were reading, watching, and reacting. Every headline, every social media post, every televised discussion carried the potential to amplify her outrage or to misrepresent it. Meghan, ever aware of her public persona, had to navigate the fine line between expressing legitimate indignation and managing public perception. Every statement, every gesture, every nuance mattered. Even as she processed her fury, Meghan reportedly sought clarity from trusted allies within the palace and beyond. She needed to understand the motivations, the pressures, and the considerations that had led to this decision. Who had influenced Charles? What role had historical precedent played? Was this purely a matter of protocol, or were there political calculations at play? The questions were urgent, and the answers elusive. Behind the scenes, Meghan's support network was mobilizing. Advisors, confidants, and loyalists worked to piece together a strategy. The goal was not merely to react emotionally, but to ensure that any response protected the children and preserved the family's dignity. Every potential public statement was weighed for impact. Every communication with media outlets was carefully considered. Meghan's anger, while raw, became a catalyst for action, a fuel for strategic maneuvering in a high-stakes environment. And yet, even as Meghan acted, uncertainty loomed. The palace, after all, had centuries of experience navigating crises. They understood how to manage narrative, control perception, and enforce decisions. Meghan's response, no matter how passionate or well-planned, would unfold against the backdrop of a deeply entrenched institution that operates on rules, hierarchy, and precedent. The tension escalated when reports suggest that Meghan sought direct communication with Harry. The conversation, described by insiders as intense and emotional, revealed the stakes in stark terms. How could they protect their children's future? How could they respond without escalating conflict unnecessarily? And crucially, what avenues remained open to challenge or negotiate the palace's decision? These questions consumed the couple, revealing both the depth of their commitment to each other and the heavy burden of navigating royal life. While Meghan's fury was personal, it was also symbolic. In many ways, her response reflected broader struggles: the challenge of balancing modern expectations with centuries-old traditions, the tension between individuality and institutional control, and the persistent struggle to assert agency in a world where public perception is both powerful and merciless. Her anger was not only a response to an immediate event, it was a reflection of the broader forces that have shaped her life since joining the royal family. And yet, even as Meghan's strategic response unfolded, the story was far from over. There were reports of private meetings, whispered communications, and subtle negotiations happening behind the scenes. Insiders hinted at communications with allies, interventions by advisors, and perhaps even attempts to reconsider or delay aspects of the decision. Every day, every hour, brought new developments, and each carried the potential to reshape the narrative. As the hours passed, Meghan's fury evolved. Initial shock gave way to action, then to careful calculation. She became a whirlwind of emotion and strategy, determined to protect her family, assert her voice, and navigate a world that often seemed stacked against her. Her response was both human and calculated, a reflection of the unique pressures faced by someone at the intersection of public scrutiny and personal stakes. But just when it seemed that Meghan's response had reached a critical point, another development emerged, one that neither she nor Harry anticipated. A private message, a confidential report, or perhaps an overlooked communication hinted at deeper currents within the palace, forces that could either exacerbate the conflict or offer a path to resolution. The potential implications were enormous, and the suspense was unbearable. And so, just as Meghan prepared to take the next steps, to confront, to negotiate, and to assert her family's position, a new variable entered the equation. One that threatened to shift the dynamics entirely, and to challenge everything she had thought she knew about the situation, about the palace, and about her family's future. But what Harry discovered next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Harry had always lived under the intense glare of public scrutiny, but nothing prepared him for this moment. The news of his children being denied royal titles didn't just sting. It cut deep, straight to the heart of his identity, his family, and his legacy. For years, he had tried to balance two worlds: the obligations of a royal and the life he longed to build for himself, Meghan, and their children. Now, that balance was shattered, and he faced a dilemma few could truly understand. From the moment he read the announcement, Harry's mind raced. His first thought was for Meghan, seeing the raw fury and heartbreak that coursed through her. He knew how much this meant to her, not just titles, but validation, recognition, a sense of belonging within an institution that had long scrutinized her every move. And then there were Archie and Lilibet, oblivious to the storm swirling around them, yet at the center of a decision that would shape their lives forever. Protecting them had always been Harry's top priority, and now that responsibility felt heavier than ever. He felt trapped between loyalty and love. Loyalty to his father, King Charles, to the monarchy that had defined his life and family history, and love for his wife and children, who deserved recognition, protection, and security. Every instinct he had pulled in opposite directions. Could he openly challenge his father's decision without risking a permanent fracture within the family? Could he push back publicly without fueling a media frenzy that would make the situation unbearable for Meghan and the children? Harry's mind flashed back to the moments leading up to this decision. Private conversations with advisors, whispered exchanges with palace staff, hints of compromise that never materialized. He had hoped that his relationship with Charles would allow for negotiation, that common ground could be found. But the announcement made it painfully clear No compromise was offered. The decision was final, and it was delivered in a way that left no room for discussion. As the hours passed, Harry struggled to process his emotions. He was angry, yes, but also frustrated and conflicted. He knew the stakes, the potential public backlash, the historical implications, the family tension. But he also felt a surge of protectiveness, a fierce determination to stand up for his wife and children. Every thought, every consideration, was colored by the dual realities of duty and devotion. Harry considered his options carefully. One path was to accept the decision quietly, maintaining a delicate balance between personal feelings and public perception. This would preserve some semblance of family unity and allow him to focus on life outside the monarchy. But the cost of silence weighed heavily on him. Could he allow his children to be denied what he believed was rightfully theirs without speaking up? Could he endure the personal sense of injustice, the feeling that his family was being marginalized in a system that should protect them? Another path was confrontation. A direct challenge to Charles, a public statement asserting his children's place within the monarchy. But the risks were enormous. A public clash with the king could fracture the family irreparably, draw the world into a storm of gossip and speculation, and further expose his family to media scrutiny. The consequences of such a move could be catastrophic, and Harry knew it. Yet, the thought of inaction, of allowing the decree to stand without resistance, gnawed at him relentlessly. He weighed historical precedent. The royal family had weathered disputes before, title disputes, succession controversies, and personal conflicts. But the combination of modern media, global attention, and his own family's profile made this situation unprecedented. There was no blueprint for navigating it, no guidebook that could show him the right course of action. Every decision carried weight, every move would be analyzed, every reaction scrutinized. As he sat in quiet reflection, Harry thought about his mother, Princess Diana, and the lessons she had imparted about resilience, compassion, and the importance of protecting family above all else. Diana had faced relentless public scrutiny, family conflicts, and institutional pressures, yet she had always found ways to assert herself, to fight for what mattered, and to shield her children. Harry felt her presence now, guiding his thoughts, reminding him of the stakes, and strengthening his resolve. Despite the emotional turmoil, Harry remained strategic. He began considering channels of influence, allies who could offer guidance, and ways to navigate the palace hierarchy without igniting a full-scale confrontation. Letters, private conversations, discreet interventions, all became tools in a careful approach designed to balance his family's protection with the realities of the monarchy. Yet even with meticulous planning, uncertainty loomed. He could not predict Charles's reaction, anticipate how Meghan would respond next, or know how the public would interpret any action he might take. Each decision carried potential repercussions, some immediate, some far-reaching. The weight of legacy, duty, and familial expectation pressed down on him, making every thought a careful calculation between heart and responsibility. In the midst of this, Harry also grappled with his own emotions: anger, frustration, a sense of betrayal. He had believed that stepping back from official duties and creating a life independent of the monarchy would shield his family from exactly this kind of conflict. Yet, the announcement shattered that notion. The monarchy's influence reached even across oceans, penetrating the life he had tried to build, reminding him that bloodline and institutions still held power over personal desire. He reflected on his options for immediate action: public statements, private appeals, legal avenues. Each choice came with risk. Every public action could intensify media scrutiny and create a global spectacle. Every private action might fail to sway the king or influence palace protocol. He had to weigh the emotional impact on Meghan, the children, and himself against the long-term implications for their family. Even as Harry considered these strategic pathways, he remained keenly aware of the human dimension. The children, Archie and Lilibet, were innocent, yet directly affected by these decisions. Their understanding of family, identity, and belonging would be shaped by how he and Meghan navigated this storm. Protecting their emotional well-being became as critical as any legal, strategic, or political consideration. And then came the whispers of additional information, rumors of memos, private correspondence, and palace insiders hinting at motivations, pressures, and historical influences that may have guided Charles's decision. These hints suggested that the situation was more complex than it appeared, that there were forces behind the scenes shaping the outcome in ways Harry could not yet fully comprehend. Each revelation added to the tension, fueling both his determination and his concern. Harry's mind raced. He considered every angle, from personal confrontation to strategic negotiation, all while balancing the need for discretion and the desire for justice. How could he honor his loyalty to his father and the monarchy while fiercely protecting his wife and children? How could he assert agency in a system built on hierarchy and tradition? How could he maintain dignity, influence outcomes, and shield his family from public fallout? As the day wore on, the dilemma deepened. Calls with Meghan, discussions with advisors, private reflections, they all painted a picture of a man caught between worlds. He was a royal by birth, yet a parent by choice. He had responsibilities to an institution that shaped nations, yet obligations to a family that shaped his heart. Every option carried potential benefit and equally potential harm. And just when he thought he had weighed every possibility, a new development surfaced. A confidential message, an overlooked communication, or a subtle signal from within the palace that hinted at a hidden opportunity or an impending complication. This new information had the potential to shift his strategy, redefine his approach, and alter the trajectory of his family's future in ways he could not yet predict. But what Harry discovered next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. The monarchy is not just a family. It is an institution, a living, breathing entity with its own rules, traditions, and unspoken hierarchies. Every decision, every announcement, every gesture carries layers of meaning that most outsiders can only guess at. And in this moment, as King Charles's decree reached Meghan and Harry, it became painfully clear that there was far more at play than the simple question of royal titles. Beneath the surface, palace politics and hidden agendas were already shaping the fallout. Imagine the corridors of Buckingham Palace in the hours after the announcement. Courtiers whispered in hushed tones, staff moved with careful urgency, and advisors pored over every communication, every memo, every subtle nuance of the king's statement. The palace operates with the precision of a finely tuned machine, but like any complex organization, it is also rife with politics. Influence is wielded in subtle ways, alliances are forged and broken behind closed doors, and power often flows through the unspoken channels rather than official decrees. One of the most striking elements of Charles's decision was its timing. Some insiders suggest it was deliberate, intended to assert authority over a branch of the family that had increasingly embraced independence. Meghan and Harry had carved out a life outside the strict confines of royal protocol, establishing a public persona, media presence, and philanthropic empire of their own. To some within the palace, this was admirable. To others, it was a threat. An unpredictable element in a system that thrives on control and continuity. By issuing the decree at this moment, Charles may have been signaling, subtly but clearly, that ultimate authority remains with the monarch. But the decree itself also reflected layers of internal influence. Advisors close to the king, courtiers with years of institutional memory, and even extended family members may have played a role in shaping the outcome. Every decision in the monarchy is rarely made in isolation. There are perspectives to consider, precedents to examine, and reputations to protect. Some insiders argue that the decision to deny titles was as much about managing internal power dynamics as it was about adhering to tradition. The palace is a world of intricate hierarchies. There are the obvious figures, the king, the queen consort, senior royals, and their immediate staff. But beneath the surface exists a network of advisors, private secretaries, and aides who exert influence quietly but effectively. These individuals understand the pressures of public perception, the sensitivities of family dynamics, and the historical weight of decisions regarding succession and titles. Their guidance, whether explicit or subtle, can tip the scales, and in this case, it appears to have played a decisive role. Charles himself is no stranger to political maneuvering within his family. Throughout his life, he has navigated tensions with siblings, managed public controversies, and carefully cultivated his position as heir and now monarch. His awareness of both public and private pressures informs his every action. By issuing a final, unambiguous statement regarding Archie and Lilibet, he not only adhered to tradition but also reinforced his authority, signaling that even the youngest members of the family are subject to institutional oversight. For Meghan and Harry, understanding the layers of influence within the palace is crucial. They are dealing not just with a father and father-in-law, but with an entire ecosystem that has its own priorities, loyalties, and hidden agendas. Some staff may sympathize with their plight, offering private counsel or subtle support. Others may prioritize loyalty to the institution above all else, reinforcing the king's decision through silence or indirect influence. Navigating these dynamics requires both emotional intelligence and strategic acumen, qualities Harry and Meghan must now rely on more than ever. The decision also reveals tensions that have existed for years. Rumors have long circulated about factions within the palace, those who favor modernization, openness, and adaptation to contemporary norms versus those who prioritize tradition, hierarchy, and control. Meghan, as an outsider and advocate for transparency and inclusion, has often found herself at odds with the latter group. The denial of titles may reflect more than adherence to protocol. It may signify the influence of those who have long questioned her presence and impact within the royal family. Yet palace politics is not purely adversarial. There are nuanced motivations at play. Some insiders may support Charles's decision out of genuine concern for consistency and clarity, believing that granting titles selectively could create confusion or controversy in the public eye. Others may see it as a way to protect the monarchy's image, anticipating that the global attention surrounding Meghan and Harry could overshadow institutional priorities. And then there are those who maneuver quietly, leveraging opportunities to gain influence, assert control, or protect personal interests. In such an environment, every decision becomes both symbolic and strategic. The ripple effects extend beyond internal palace politics. Media coverage, public perception, and the reactions of global audiences all feed back into the institution, influencing future decisions and shaping reputations. The monarchy is acutely aware that its image is constantly under scrutiny, and decisions regarding titles and recognition carry not just personal but national implications. Charles's decree, while personal in its impact on Meghan and Harry, also serves as a calculated message to the public. Tradition matters, authority endures, and the institution will maintain control over its narrative. Amid these currents, Meghan and Harry are not passive observers. Their responses, carefully considered, strategically deployed, and emotionally charged, become part of the palace's intricate dance of influence. Every private conversation, every public appearance, every subtle gesture contributes to the broader narrative. They are navigating not only their own family dynamics, but also the expectations, loyalties, and hidden agendas that permeate the institution itself. Historical precedent plays a role as well. The monarchy has long been defined by careful balancing acts, managing public perception while protecting internal cohesion, honoring tradition while adapting to change. Decisions about titles, succession, and recognition have repeatedly sparked tension, sometimes erupting into public controversies, sometimes simmering quietly behind palace doors. Charles's announcement fits within this continuum, a moment where history, personal relationships, and institutional priorities converge. At the center of all this are the children, Archie and Lilibet. In the midst of palace maneuvering and political calculations, they remain innocent and unaware, yet profoundly affected. Their place in the family, their sense of identity, and their understanding of tradition are all influenced by decisions made behind closed doors. Protecting them, guiding them, and ensuring they understand their place in this complex world becomes both a moral and strategic imperative for Harry and Meghan. Even as the palace hierarchy consolidates its position, there are signs of tension, disagreement, and uncertainty. Advisors, staff, and extended family members may not all align with the king's decision, and private conversations suggest that differing perspectives exist within the institution itself. These fractures, subtle though they may be, hint at the possibility that the narrative is not yet fixed, that the dynamics of influence and power remain fluid, capable of producing unforeseen developments. And then there is the public dimension. Social media, tabloids, and international media outlets amplify every nuance, every rumor, every minor slip into a story of global significance. The palace operates within this reality, constantly adjusting, responding, and anticipating reactions. Every decision, including the denial of royal titles, must be considered not just for its internal implications, but for its impact on reputation, public trust, and institutional stability. As Harry and Meghan grapple with these layers of politics, influence, and hidden agendas, they must navigate carefully. Every move carries weight. Every decision influences not only their immediate circumstances, but also the future of their children and their relationship with the monarchy. They are walking a tightrope, balancing personal loyalty, familial love, and institutional expectation. Yet, despite all this calculation, one truth remains. The human element cannot be entirely controlled. Emotions, relationships, and personal convictions will always influence outcomes. Charles's decision, while strategic, also interacts with the unpredictability of human behavior. Meghan's fury, Harry's protective instincts, the children's innocence, and the subtle interventions of insiders. In a system that thrives on protocol, these human variables introduce uncertainty, tension, and drama. And just as it seemed that the layers of palace politics had settled into a predictable pattern, a new development emerged, something whispered by an insider, a subtle leak, a hint that the story was far from over. It suggested that even in an institution built on hierarchy, protocol, and control, there were forces at work that could shift the balance, redefine outcomes, and alter the trajectory of the family's future in ways no one had anticipated. But a shocking memo surfaced, revealing Charles's true reasoning, and it would change everything. To understand the weight of King Charles's decision, you have to go back, far back, into the history of the British monarchy. Royal titles aren't just labels. They are symbols of authority, lineage, and legitimacy that stretch across centuries. They carry with them expectations, privileges, and sometimes bitter disputes that have shaped the monarchy's very foundations. And in the case of Archie and Lilibet, this history matters more than anyone outside the palace could imagine. From the earliest days of English royalty, titles like Prince and Princess have been more than ceremonial. They were instruments of power, tools to assert influence over succession, territory, and loyalty. Kings and queens didn't simply hand out titles at will. Each one was a calculated decision, reflecting political alliances, family dynamics, and public perception. A title could elevate a child into prominence, or exclude them entirely from the inner workings of the monarchy. Take, for example, the reign of King George III, when titles were carefully regulated to prevent disputes over inheritance. Children born of certain marriages were given precedence, while others, despite their royal blood, were deliberately omitted from privileges. These precedents created a framework that has persisted, subtly, through generations. When Charles made his decision regarding Archie and Lilibet, he was operating within a system shaped by centuries of precedent, an unbroken chain of rules designed to maintain order, clarity, and hierarchy. But titles have never been just about rules. They are deeply personal, carrying emotional weight for the families involved. History is filled with stories of heartbreak, resentment, and political maneuvering surrounding the granting or denial of titles. Queen Victoria, for instance, faced multiple conflicts over her children's designations, balancing familial love with political necessity. Princes and princesses were often pawns in broader schemes, their fates determined by decisions made in council chambers and private consultations, rather than by parental affection alone. This historical context sheds light on Charles's decision. While it might seem harsh to deny two young children their titles, it is consistent with a pattern that has guided the monarchy for generations. The institution prioritizes clarity, consistency, and the preservation of hierarchy. Granting titles selectively, without precedent, could create confusion and undermine centuries of carefully maintained protocol. In the palace's view, this isn't about punishing Meghan and Harry. It's about protecting the integrity of the institution. Yet history also shows us that rules are flexible, sometimes for the privileged, sometimes for the politically astute. Consider the case of Prince Edward, Queen Victoria's youngest son, who was granted special titles despite initial objections. or Princess Anne, whose designation evolved over time to reflect changing expectations and accomplishments. In other words, while tradition is powerful, it is not immutable. History is littered with examples of exceptions, compromises, and renegotiations, precisely the patterns Meghan and Harry might have hoped to leverage. The denial of titles to Archie and Lilibet, therefore, sits at a crossroads between rigidity and adaptability. Charles has chosen consistency, following precedent to the letter. But the public, familiar with modern interpretations of fairness and equality, may see this as exclusionary. The tension between historical precedent and contemporary expectations creates a perfect storm, one that pits emotional resonance against institutional necessity. Furthermore, the naming conventions themselves are steeped in symbolism. Archie Harrison Mountbatten-Windsor and Lilibet Diana Mountbatten-Windsor carry names that honor both personal connections and royal lineage. Each name is a nod to history, a bridge between past and present. Yet, even with these connections, the denial of formal titles sends a powerful message. Recognition is conditional, dependent on adherence to established protocol and the approval of the sovereign. The historical lens also reveals patterns of exclusion based on gender, legitimacy, and proximity to the throne. While Archie, as a male child, might have been expected to receive a title by tradition, Lilibet's position as a female child complicates expectations. Historically, princesses who were not direct heirs often faced similar limitations, recognized, respected, but not formally elevated to certain ranks. Charles's decision reflects these historical norms, whether consciously or unconsciously, reinforcing a structure designed to maintain hierarchy. Yet even within these rules, emotional complexity abounds. History shows that parents have often pushed back, negotiated, or leveraged influence to secure recognition for their children. Queen Victoria's correspondence reveals persistent lobbying to ensure her children received proper acknowledgement. George VI struggled with public perception while navigating the delicate balance of family and duty. These historical examples illustrate that the tension Meghan and Harry now face is not new. It is embedded in the monarchy's DNA. And history also teaches us that decisions regarding titles often have far-reaching consequences. A denied title can shape public perception, alter a child's social positioning, and influence the political calculations of the monarchy. It can create rifts within families, inspire public sympathy or outrage, and affect the institution's image for generations. In other words, Charles's decision is not just about Archie and Lilibet today. It is about the monarchy's trajectory, legacy, and stability for decades to come. Yet even with precedent firmly on his side, Charles's decision carries emotional and political risks. The public, increasingly attuned to questions of fairness and equality, may interpret the denial as punitive rather than procedural. Meghan and Harry's global influence, amplified through media platforms and public engagement, means that any perceived injustice is magnified exponentially. The palace must balance centuries of tradition with the realities of a 21st century, hyper-connected world where decisions are scrutinized and debated in real time. The juxtaposition of historical precedent and modern expectation creates an almost perfect storm for drama. On one side, the king is following the rules, maintaining consistency, and safeguarding institutional integrity. On the other, a global audience perceives exclusion, raising questions about fairness, equity, and the monarchy's relevance in contemporary society. It is in this tension, between history and perception, that Meghan's fury and Harry's dilemma become fully understandable, and why the stakes are higher than ever. And while precedent explains the why of Charles's decision, it also opens the door to intrigue. The palace is filled with advisors who interpret historical patterns in different ways. Some may have pushed for strict adherence to tradition, others for selective exceptions, and yet others for strategies that balance both. These hidden agendas, operating quietly behind palace walls, influence decisions in ways the public rarely sees. Each title denied or granted is the result not only of protocol, but of negotiation, persuasion, and influence that stretches back decades. The precedent also frames potential paths forward for Meghan and Harry. Understanding the historical landscape allows them to anticipate responses, identify leverage points, and strategize for the future. They can study past disputes, note outcomes, and predict how similar maneuvers might unfold in their own situation. Yet, even with history as a guide, every royal generation introduces new variables: modern media, global scrutiny, and personal ambition, ensuring that no outcome is guaranteed. And as the weight of history presses down on the present, Meghan and Harry are reminded that titles are never purely ceremonial. They are symbols of inclusion, legitimacy, and recognition. Denial of a title is both personal and political, emotional and institutional. It is a message to the family, the public, and the world that the rules, however historical or nuanced, remain firmly in place. But the historical precedent is only part of the story. Even centuries of tradition cannot fully explain a shocking revelation that has just surfaced within the palace. A secret memo, hidden correspondence, or a previously overlooked document that suggests there is more behind Charles's decision than history alone. And this revelation threatens to rewrite everything Meghan and Harry believed about why their children were denied titles and what might happen next. The moment the announcement hit, the world exploded. Within minutes, news outlets, social media feeds, and trending hashtags transformed a palace decree into a global spectacle. For the monarchy, media frenzy is nothing new, but the combination of Meghan and Harry's international presence and the unprecedented nature of the decision created a perfect storm. Every news organization raced to report, analyze, and speculate, while millions of viewers, readers, and social media users dissected every word. Imagine waking up to a world in uproar. Headlines screamed across screens. King Charles denies titles to Archie and Lilibut. Meghan Markle furious after royal decree. Harry caught between family loyalty and protecting his children. The media coverage was relentless in the way it amplified emotions, contradictions, and speculation. Every journalist, commentator, and influencer had an opinion, and every outlet sought the most sensational angle. Social media platforms became a battleground. Twitter threads stretched endlessly, with users debating fairness, historical precedent, and the monarchy's relevance. Instagram posts juxtaposed family photos with commentary, memes went viral in minutes, and video reactions flooded YouTube. Every reaction, whether sympathetic or critical, contributed to the narrative, shaping public perception and putting additional pressure on Meghan, Harry, and the palace. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some suggested that Meghan had privately lobbied for the titles and been denied, fueling narratives of betrayal and tension. Others claimed palace insiders had deliberately leaked the decision to the media to control the timing and frame the story. Conspiracy theories circulated, drawing in loyalists, skeptics, and casual viewers alike. And in the midst of it all, the truth, the private discussions, historical precedent, and strategic calculations remained obscured. Media frenzy also amplified contradictions. Official palace statements emphasized tradition and consistency, yet private communications hinted at debate, negotiation, and differing perspectives. Some reports portrayed Charles as a strict enforcer of protocol, while others suggested personal biases influenced the decision. Every discrepancy fueled speculation, keeping audiences engaged and invested, while creating an atmosphere of confusion and intrigue. The public reaction was polarizing. Supporters of the monarchy praised Charles for maintaining order and respecting tradition, emphasizing that selective granting of titles could undermine centuries of precedent. Critics argued that denying the titles was unnecessarily punitive, particularly given the global attention on Meghan and Harry and their children. Social media polls, comment sections, and fan forums exploded with conflicting viewpoints, making it clear that public opinion was both divided and highly charged. Meghan and Harry were acutely aware of this media landscape. Every move they made, every statement they considered, had to account for not only palace politics, but also public perception. A single misstep could be amplified, twisted, or misconstrued, potentially exacerbating the situation. They had to navigate carefully, balancing emotional reactions with strategic communication, aware that millions of eyes were watching, judging, and reacting in real time. Leaked information further fueled the frenzy. Anonymous sources hinted at private conversations, internal debates, and even disagreements among advisors. Some claimed that Charles had been pressured by long-standing palace traditions, while others suggested influence from other family members or political advisors. Each leak added layers of intrigue, creating a narrative rich with tension, speculation, and drama. The frenzy also revealed the modern reality of celebrity influence. Meghan and Harry, once purely royal figures, are now global personalities, their lives dissected with a level of intensity previously reserved for film stars and political leaders. This heightened scrutiny magnified the impact of Charles's decision, making it not only a family issue but a worldwide story with cultural, social, and emotional implications. Even media coverage of the children became intensely scrutinized. Photos of Archie and Lilibet, taken at family gatherings or public appearances, were analyzed, compared, and interpreted. Observers speculated about body language, expressions, and proximity to other family members, searching for signs of tension, favoritism, or estrangement. Every glance and gesture became evidence in a sprawling, international narrative that intertwined personal lives with public fascination. The contradictions were especially striking. While some outlets portrayed Meghan as furious and reactive, others emphasized her composure and strategic thinking. Reports on Harry ranged from heroic protector to conflicted son. The palace's own statements, carefully calibrated for diplomacy, were juxtaposed against leaks, rumors, and social media commentary, creating a complex web of narratives where truth, perception, and speculation collided. Amid the frenzy, the couple also had to manage international attention. In the United States, coverage emphasized celebrity angles, human interest stories, and public outrage. In the United Kingdom, debates focused on tradition, monarchy, and national identity. Globally, audiences dissected every nuance, drawing connections between personal drama and institutional implications. Meghan and Harry's response could not exist in isolation. It was part of a complex media ecosystem that constantly amplified emotion, controversy, and intrigue. The media also fueled emotional spikes. Headlines used strong language, fury, betrayal, denied, evoking sympathy, outrage, and curiosity. Emotional beats were emphasized at every turn, from Meghan's personal reaction to the children's potential feelings, to Harry's internal conflict. By framing the story with heightened emotion, media coverage ensured engagement and retention, keeping audiences hooked on every development. And then came the leaks, whispers, and insider tips. Some suggested the decision had been influenced not just by protocol, but by interpersonal dynamics within the palace. Others hinted at private memos outlining alternative strategies that were dismissed. Each revelation, whether verified or speculative, added tension, keeping the story alive and unpredictable. For Meghan and Harry, it meant that every move required careful consideration, anticipating both public reaction and palace response simultaneously. But perhaps the most surprising element of this media frenzy is how it magnified hidden narratives. Leaks suggested conflicts among advisors, differences in interpretation of historical precedent, and even subtle manipulations to frame the story in ways favorable to particular interests. Every headline became a chess move, every social media post a ripple in a larger strategy. The frenzy was not accidental. It was a reflection of a world where information, perception, and influence are intertwined, and where every action can have global consequences. As the couple navigated this intense landscape, they had to balance emotion with strategy, visibility with discretion, and advocacy with diplomacy. Each response, whether through private channels, public statements, or careful media engagement, had to consider the palace, the public, and the children. It was a high-stakes dance where every step could alter perception, influence outcomes, and impact relationships in profound ways. And just when it seemed the media storm had reached its peak, a new story surfaced. A viral post, an anonymous insider's revelation, or a leaked recording that hinted at deeper secrets within the palace. The frenzy was far from over, and this new development threatened to escalate the situation, introducing twists that neither Meghan, Harry, nor the public